I am the Executive Director of the Dalton Foundation, and the relink.org project is one that is near and dear to our heart that we have funded and supported since 2017. For those of you not familiar with relink.org, it's an online search tool for addiction, recovery, re-entry, human trafficking, and basic needs services throughout the state of Ohio. We have over 7,200 organizations on the site, and it's used by thousands of Ohioans every year. I was saying just the other day, I wish our utilization would go down because people didn't need it. But I think we're going to hear today, thanks to COVID, that it is something that is still unfortunately needed, and maybe even needed more than ever. So we're committed to keeping that available. I wanted to take a brief moment to introduce Sarah Capri to everybody. She is new to us, and we are very thankful for her joining us and just stepping right in. And she's been a wonderful addition to our team. So I wanted to introduce everyone to her. But I really want to just get started because I'm so excited about this panel that we have assembled here today and this topic. I just met with them a couple weeks ago, and we were planning this webinar thinking, oh, well, let's wait till the first of the year. But their hearts and their passion were like, no, we want to share with everybody before the holidays some tips on family coping skills. And so I so appreciate their heart, and I wanted to share that with everyone. So the way this is going to work today is we're going to have Greg speak first and share a little background on how families are impacted by the opioid epidemic. Then we're going to have Dr. Beth Delaney share a little bit of the personal side and how it affected her and her family. And then we're going to switch over to Roy to share a little bit practical tips and tools for families and this epidemic. And it will just be a high-level overview of all the resources that he has available, but we want to make everyone aware that these exist. So first thing I want to do, I do want to briefly introduce all three of y'all, and then we're just going to go for the rest of the hour. I want to turn it over to you guys. For those of you joining us, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat or the question and answer. I will be monitoring those today, and we'll get those shared. We do just have an hour, so it's very short. So we want to respect everyone's time. If we don't get to your question for some reason, we will connect you directly with the speakers to share that. So first, I want to just give a brief background. Greg Delaney is the current outreach coordinator for statewide alcohol and drug treatment saver Woodhaven, and he is a presenter and contributor to the faith-based recovery efforts of the Health and Human Services Center for Faith and Opportunity Initiatives in Washington, D.C. He's also part of Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's Recovery Ohio Advisory Council, and he's championing the efforts of the faith community throughout Ohio. He serves on several boards through Ohio Citizens for Advocacy and Addiction Recovery, and he himself is in long-term recovery, and I could give more. He's so involved in this topic, and we're so thankful to have him here. And his wonderful wife, Beth, is a graduate of Wright State University and has a doctorate of nursing practice from the Ohio State University. She's currently serving on the nurse faculty at Cedarville University as an associate professor, and she's also working as a family nurse practitioner specializing in oncology. She partners with her husband, Greg, to work locally and around the country, educating and increasing collaboration among organizations that seek to provide hope and help to those facing addiction and those who are in recovery. And then last but not least, we have Roy Puyon with us, who is the Executive Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. It's very safe to say he is extremely passionate about helping families cope with the challenges of having an addiction in the family and how it affects the family, and to try to mitigate those effects. He has developed many curriculum and programs, of which you'll just get a very small sampling today. In his past experience, he worked to set up disease state management models nationwide, and he was also the founder of a family Alzheimer's learning center. So again, that family component. So without further ado, Greg, I want to turn it over to you. and let you start sharing your screen and sharing with us.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much, Barbara and Sarah. And our partnership with Relink is amazing and great. And we're always so excited to serve you and also serve those that are on the call today. I'm going to share my screen. As Barbara mentioned, my role today is really just to kind of tee up a perspective of substance use disorders' impact on the family. And one of the things that we want to try to do is just help broaden the lens about substance use disorder to that it is a family issue. And you can see from that quote, this is from some friends of mine in Faith and Recovery. They have facilities in Florida and Boston and others. And I think they do a good job with that quick definition. It's a family disease, and it has a drastic impact on the family, not just the person who is suffering from substance use disorder. And so as one who has suffered from that, and as one who has found recovery, I know that from my own personal experience, the impact that that had on my family. And Dr. Delaney, my wife's going to take that a little bit later, but it definitely bore itself out exactly as the way that the Faith and Recovery folks had defined it. And so one of the things we wanted to definitely do today, and we will build on this over the course of the next couple of webinars, is really to make sure that our definition of addiction is clear. And so to do that, we go to the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the American Society of Addiction Medicine, as well as Barbara mentioned, the Partnership Center that's there in DC that sits under Health and Human Services. This is kind of a conglomeration of those definitions of addiction, but the key pieces to this are what are highlighted in red. It's a compulsive issue. It's a compulsive disease that, despite the adverse consequences that come with it, folks will get gripped by it and they will remain in it, often with not a real way to get out without a lot of assistance. And the other piece of it is treatable, and it's chronic. And so sometimes when we look at the stigma that wraps around substance use disorder, it's often pushed out there as a moral failing, or these folks are just bad folks, or can't you just stop doing it? And we have to move that narrative away from what's wrong with someone to really what has happened. And as a result of what's happened in life, often there's been a course of self-medication, and the self-medication has turned into this chronic issue that they're dealing with that we call substance use disorder. So making sure that we have the definition, because this is where we're working from, because this is important for families to understand that this is much more than just a bad decision, that there's much more going on with someone who is suffering from this. I do like what Beverly Conyers says here about this, and she wrote a book, The Addict and the Family. These families are the hidden victims of addiction, enduring enormous levels of stress and pain. They suffer sleepless nights, deep anxiety, physical exhaustion. It's brought on by worry and desperation. They lie awake for hours on end as fear for their loved ones' safety crowds out any possibility of sleep, and they carry this huge weight. And that's the truth. In Ohio right now, the estimates are that 1 out of 3 Ohioans is being impacted by the addiction crisis that we face in our state right now. So if you kind of do the math and you go outside, or you're at Walmart and you can go 1, 2, you, 1, 2, you, it really does broaden the picture of those who are being impacted much further beyond just the person who is dealing with the substance use individually. And so this is important to understand, and that's kind of where we're going to take this, is recognizing that the family is impacted. We're going to give you some examples of that, and then, as Barbara mentioned, Roy's going to give you some tools to kind of to think about and build upon. So one of the things that we really work from is I like this picture of the recovery-oriented system of care for someone who is working their way into a recovery plan, emerging out of substance use disorder. And what's important about this is you can see a variety of systems and a variety of services that are often needed for the family that's in the middle. Sometimes you'll see this model with just an individual sitting in the middle, and that's really not the case. It really is a family picture. And so when we think about that, how are we serving that entire frame of family that may need help from all of these different disparate services in order to help their loved one step into recovery, but they may need some recovery themselves. they may need some counsel themselves. They may need some treatment themselves. And so looking at it from the standpoint that when this impacts the family, when it steps into a family, when it's engaged in a family, that often we need to make sure that all of those services have a view, not only for the person who's suffering, but also the family who is around them and supporting them. And so some of the ways that substance use disorder impacts a family, and this is from some folks from Discovery in New Jersey, but I like this because they kind of boil it down into some very, real and tangible places and ways that the family is impacted when there's a family member who's dealing with substance use. Often we'll see that the children are neglected. Schoolwork doesn't get finished. Band concerts get missed. So there's an impact to the kids. Often those impacts turn into the children seeking a way to medicate as well and going into substance use. It's a generational thing. We will see trust often negated in a family. Dr. Delaney will talk a little bit about that in her part, about the trust that was eroded during my substance use and how that impacted her and impacted my family. Clearly, there's tons of stress that comes with this. The person who's looking to relieve stress is often the one that is, seeking within a substance to try to manage that. But then there's the overall stress and burden that this puts on the family. Going back to Conyers' quote, there's all of this negativity and all of this challenge that swirls around an individual who is suffering from this. And often that brings a huge stressful burden. Can say that finances are often impacted. That is true. My addiction led us to bankruptcy as a family, lost a home, lost retirements. So it can have a devastating effect on finance. The sad part is, and we're seeing a little bit of this with COVID, is that everyone being kind of isolated and not having a chance to go to school or be checked. We're seeing an increase in child abuse, and often those go hand in hand with someone in the house that's dealing with substance use. And so we're starting to see more domestic violence and more child abuse during this COVID time because there's not as much eyes and ears on situations. And then clearly there's confusion. Again, going all the way back to that first piece is that this is a chronic illness, but it's often viewed as a moral failing. And so there's confusion about how, as a family member, do I really try to help the person who I love who's suffering from all of this? And so there's some roles that end up kind of popping up within the family that tend to be a little dysfunctional as they try to respond to their family member. Roy's going to talk a lot about enabling. I won't go there, but there's just some other kind of roles that step into play. One being the hero. For example, in a family that could even be the oldest child sometimes. It feels like they've got to step in and make up for what dad or mom are not doing. And so they take on a role that they're maybe not prepared for or too young for. You'll see the scapegoat. This will be the rebellious one in the family who lashes back out and adds to the chaos in the family because they're so angry with the loved one that's dealing with the substance use issue and all the consequences that come with it. And so then there's others pieces like the mascot and the lost child. This is all available, and we'll send this deck out to you, and I'll send the notes with it. But just recognize that as families are trying to adapt to an individual suffering from this, often they will take on these roles, like the mascot, for example, that's a guy who's trying to laugh it away, trying to be the jokester, trying to just diffuse the situation with humor. And so these roles get assumed by the family members sometimes, and clearly they're not functional or healthy, but often it's just in response to what they're experiencing with family. And so Barbara had mentioned that we work a ton with the faith community. And one of the things that we've really stressed to our faith-based communities is their uniqueness to be able to not only serve the person and provide services and connectivity for the ones suffering in substance use, but also to provide supportive services and connection for the family member. And so I really like the way that Kelly Moselle, a good friend of mine from Atlanta, kind of carves this out, and really looking toward the middle of the quote, that faith-based communities are equipped to minister to individuals and their families. And so how do I do that? I need to be equipped in order to do that. And that's the intention of these webinars, as well as offering up to you some things that Roy's going to talk about in terms of a deeper dive to get trained. But I think the church has a wonderful chance, the faith community has a wonderful opportunity to start to build this caring community, and that will foster some acceptance and forgiveness and reconciliation, which are all necessary for not only the individual who's suffering from this to heal, but also for family and family members and the community around them to heal. So one of the things I want to do, I want to show you a quick video. It's about 3 minutes, because one of the things that pops up often is, well, I can't help my family member until they hit the bottom, until they really come to the end of it. And there's a little fallacy to that. That was an old line of school of thought. And I'd like you just to kind of look at it a little bit different, in that as a family member and a community member, or as that church, friend or a partner or a colleague, there's ways that you can help early on before someone hits that rock bottom. And I want you to check this out.
Greg, you can't hear this.
Can't hear your sound, Greg.
No sound?
Yeah, you got to select use computer audio.
Oh, I thought I did. Okay. Well, I won't take the time to do that. I'll just encourage you. I'm sorry about that. What this video really kind of talks about is that as a family member, you're seeing your individual, your loved one suffering. And, when in the past we sit there and go, well, they've got to go to the point of overdose. They have to get to that point of incarceration. They have to get to that place in their life where it's at the bottom. And that's not necessarily the case. It's important that if you have family members or friends that are suffering with this stuff, you have a wonderful opportunity to get educated on how to be ready when maybe they just ask a question, or maybe they make the statement, I really hate where I'm at right now. And then you can be ready to say, well, you know what? I don't know exactly how you're feeling, but I'm here for you. And you know what? I've got some good folks that are down this way that I've looked into. This treatment center can help you. This place can be of assistance. Maybe you want to go to counsel with me, and we can go talk to a pastor that understands this. It doesn't have to get to that place where we're, reviving someone with Narcan in order to get them back on track. It's just a case of being ready and being cognizant and acute to the person that you're caring for, and saying, okay, how can I get best prepared for when that opportunity does present itself? But what I see in my experience within the recovery community, as well as working for a treatment center, is often, if we can catch that moment. And as a person who's been addicted, I had moments of clarity all the time where I realized, man, this isn't what I want to be doing. And if I had somebody there, and I did, and you're going to meet her in a second, but somebody to say, okay, let's go do this, let's go get this help, that could spur them on and act as a catalyst to get some help. So one of the things I wanted to kind of close up with a little bit is that if you are currently in recovery and you're listening to this, or got a family member that's still dealing with stuff, the holidays are tricky because it's a lot of celebration, but it also, for someone who's in the isolation of substance use, it can be awful. And so some things that I wanted just to tell you is, be mindful of your loved one. And if you're on this call today and you're dealing with some challenges, recognize that, be mindful that you may get into situations or encounters with your family that are uncomfortable. So be sure that you're going to evaluate what it is that you're going to wade into. Evaluate, how are you going to manage it if it gets a little bit out of hand? If you're in early recovery and the bar's open or whatever, evaluate your situation and make sure that you're ready. And also, this is a great time if you're in recovery, or a great time for a family member who's helping someone along that path, just to reinforce those things of recovery. It's okay to go to a meeting during the holidays. It's probably a great idea to go to a meeting in the holidays. The other part is if someone that you're working with, respect the fact that maybe this, trip to grandma's, which may not happen because of COVID anyway, but maybe this particular gathering is stressful. and it's hard for someone to manage. Be respectful that if they decide, hey, look, I really can't figure on going this time, or I really don't want to participate because I think it puts me at risk, respect that and give them an opportunity to get out of that. Because remember, in all of this, going all the way back to the ROSC picture, the Recovery Oriented System of Care picture, we're all in this together. The good news is there's help. There's a lot of help available. You're going to hear about some of it today. Relink is a fantastic resource to use if you're seeking a way to help someone find treatment. But we also have within Ohio a fantastic mental health and addiction services team. Lori Chris, who's a direct report to the governor, is one of the best in the country at this. You have your local resources with, AWACBA there, the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health Authorities. Those are easy places to contact for resources and help. And then, of course, Recovery Ohio. So that's kind of an overview of just helping you broaden your lens to look at this issue as a family issue, bigger picture than just the person that's suffering with it. And so what we wanted to do today is bring along my wife, Dr. Elizabeth Delaney. You got a little bit of her background here, but she's going to kind of speak to you from the perspective of a family member who had to navigate some of these waters when I was really in the throes of my addiction for about 15 years. And so, Dr. D, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, honey. Barbara, thank you again for having us today. It's always our honor and pleasure to try to be able to talk to somebody. If you can go back, Greg, just the previous slide for a moment. I'm going to give you a quick overview of our history, very quick, just so Barbara and Roy know. I'm going to try to target to ending at 10:30, and so 10:30, 10:31, somewhere in there. So here's the story. Basically, we were, high school sweethearts. That's crazy. I'm sitting in an office in my clinic, and if you don't move, the lights turn off. So that's why it just went dark, but that's kind of funny that it happened right now, right? I think it's hysterical.
That's the story of my life.
Right? Greg and I will talk about this later, that I have a technology problem at Aura, but that was just hilarious. Okay, so high school sweethearts, grew up, we both were having opportunities to be very successful, high school, college. I became a nurse. He was an international businessman. And international business people, even though that they've never had a drink their entire life, and we were the people that were the designated drivers for all of our high school, college, early young adult life. When you begin to go international, and then you realize that maybe you're going to cope with alcohol, it can turn disastrous rather quickly. And so for us, first thing I wanted to share as a family member, and you can see our kids there. So we have 3 beautiful, wonderful children that the Lord blessed us with. And we've been together a long time, over 30 years. And so the first thing that I would say that is troubling for me as a family member, and as I look back, is I didn't even know what was happening. So here's the deal. I was a healthcare professional, and I was supposedly good at what I did. And so as people were starting to notice and do things, and actually they were starting to isolate from us, I didn't even really know what was happening. I also have a poor sense of smell, like my body. So when people were like, didn't you smell that? I'm like, no, I did not. And here's the deal. I love my husband. My husband, when I saw him, the reason that he was so attractive to me is my father had been an alcoholic related to substance use disorder associated with a car accident. And he started taking opioids to cope with chronic back pain, which turned into alcoholism. And then we learn later that there's alcoholism rampant in his family. So he got to the point where we had all of those classic, I was the daughter of an alcoholic. And when I met Greg, church boy, clean cut, straight A's, looking good, I'm thinking, oh, that dude, yes. And I'm not interested in going down that path again. And lo and behold, we found ourselves on the same path. In addition to my father and my husband having struggles with substance use disorder, there are other members of my family and people near and dear, very close to us, that not only struggle with substance use disorder, but mental health issues. So what I've come to learn is, as a family member, one of the things that I hope that family members will learn is everybody has stuff. We are coping with our existence on planet Earth, and sometimes we cope in healthy ways. and other times not so healthy ways, but that's it. Everybody's trying to cope with their stuff. And so back to learning, when I was in shock and denial about, oh my goodness, my husband cannot be an alcoholic because he's my knight in shining armor. That's not happening. It was hard for me to come around. So probably the first year or two, I couldn't even see it. So that's not uncommon. So don't beat yourself up because we're all trying to cope with our stuff, right? So the first thing is, one of the things we're trying to teach people is education, because when you're a family member, you engage in things that maybe you wouldn't normally engage. And so as Greg said earlier, as a family member, thinking about all the energy that it takes to, oh my gosh, he's coming home angry. Will this day, every single day when I wake up, do I need to extra protect my kids because he's in cuckoo land? Or can I be comfortable with taking care of my kids because I don't think he's using at the moment? So we had many years where every single day I would wake up and I would not know exactly which version of Greg I was getting. And I had to adapt my personal activities from day to day of what would happen with the kids, how I was going to get the kids from here to there, what I was going to happen experience with him based upon what was happening with his substance use disorders. So if I would have realized what was happening better about what's going on in his brain and learned a little bit about the science of addiction, a little bit about the definitions of an addiction as a family member, I think it would have fast forwarded me into helping not only myself, but my family, and then being a different kind of support to Greg as he was uncovering his own journey with substance use disorders. So I found that shock and denial was absolutely common. I know how much energy it took. And so I tried to get education. And what we're hoping to do with these types of webinars is to start to help family members understand. The other piece of education that I think is really critical for family members to understand in that science piece, and we're going to talk about resources, but there's something that my good friend Joyce Meyer, she's not my good friend. I feel like she's my good friend because I've read all of her stuff and I watch her regularly. And Dr. Charles Stanley taught me. But when I got educated about what was going on with substance use disorder, I learned about not going around the mountain. What that means is that the person with substance use disorder, their brain is causing them to have compulsive behaviors. And those compulsive behaviors do not mean that they don't love me, that they don't care about me, that all of those things are not important. But their brain actually, the concept that I learned from Addiction Policy Forum is his brain was hijacked. Like, so he wasn't able to prioritize in the way that a person that is not using a substance can prioritize. So learning about his priorities were different, and they were not based upon his care for me and his children. That caused us, because you have different priorities, you can't have equal communication that reaches toward a common goal most of the time, is my experience. So what I spent a lot of energy on, which I didn't understand and know at the time, which I hope we can teach others, is that going around the mountain again and again and again, or that circular argument that you have over and over and over. What do you mean you spent money on alcohol? What do you mean you didn't get the kids to practice on time? What do you mean you drove drunk? What do you mean you're stuffing wine bags everywhere in our house? And maybe I'm screaming at the top of my lungs at 2 o'clock in the morning because I feel so out of control. So not only did I try to start getting educated, but I also started to seek resources. So I did go to Al-Anon. I found Al-Anon very helpful because that's where I learned that I was not alone and I wasn't uncommon. So when you're in this by yourself, you feel like you're alone, like your journey is unique. And when I went to those Al-Anon places, I realized, oh my goodness, it sounds like they're living in my house because there are similar characteristics, similar things that we do, and we can learn with substance use disorder as a family member that we can take forward and learn from others. So the faith became very important to me. I like to think about approaching family members, and in my practice as a nurse practitioner, as a person who goes and works and try to encourage people in faith groups, that this is something that's holistic. So For the family, for the person who is struggling with substance use disorder, we have to have a physical approach, we have to have a mental approach, and we have to have a spiritual approach. So for me, the power of speaking God's word was a helpful spiritual tool because it categorized scripture into things like discouragement, depression, anxiety, and I could pull that tool out when I felt so anxious and out of control. For me, the scripture was very soothing. If you go to the next page, when I was, the next slide, at the end of my rope and I was just learning about education, I literally ran to this book. I literally was sitting in the middle of a Barnes and Noble praying, Lord, show me what book I need to read because I was tired of screaming, nagging, yelling, and I wasn't being effective and I didn't know why. So I sat in the middle, literally, people, I don't even know who saw me sitting in that aisle, but prayed about what book to read. And this was my step and journey into connecting concepts from Al-Anon into getting educated into, oh my goodness, there are some things that I could do as a family member to not only help me and what's happening with my kids, but also support Greg. Greg, what's the next slide? Is that the end? I think it is. Okay, so what I hope that I shared was that this is very, very difficult as a family member. And when you talk about trust, one of the final parting thoughts I wanted to share with people on the webinar is, remember that the substance use disorder person does not necessarily understand. So when they get clean and they get on their sober plan, they don't realize, and they likely don't remember the chaos that occurred. If you talk to Greg, Greg would say he does not remember the whole entire year of 2007. So I'm trying to, he thinks that all of a sudden, dang, I'm in recovery, I'm doing good. Automatically the trust returns. And for most humans who have not had that experience, you understand that trust is rebuilt and gained back. We had a lot of work in that area. So trust is a particular issue that needs to be addressed with family members and educated to those in substance use disorder so they realize, hey, you aren't even aware of the chaos, so you're going to have some grace and mercy with the family member. And the family member has to understand, hey, they don't know anything what's going on. So I hope that that just gave you a quick insight into what a person who has a family member with substance use disorder, just really quickly, but how can we start to put really effective evidence-based tools that are holistic into the hands of our family members so that they can understand and support in that recovery-oriented system of care. I hope that was helpful. Take it away, Barbara and Roy.
Oh, thank you, Beth. That was excellent. Both thank you, Greg and Beth. That was wonderful. So impactful. Thank you so much for sharing. And as you both stated, we're going to turn it over to Roy now, who will start sharing his screen, and he will share some of the practical tools that he's been working to develop to help families.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Sarah, for putting this presentation together for us to share. Welcome, everyone. My name is Roy Puyon, and I'm the Executive Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. What we're doing with the Family Solution Finder, it's a learning center for families. It's an education center. And we're implanting this into all counties across Ohio, and then nationwide, we're gonna go county by county. No, really. Because there are families in every county, and there are communities that are all suffering. And although it'll take time, this is a mission worth setting out for and asking others to participate in. So the model is set up to where we actually put it into the community through the stakeholders of that community. And we can explain more about that at another time. But what we want to talk today about is the enabling boundaries and change of the journey for a family living with substance use disorders. This is kind of a not so perfect storm. And I'm taking that from the movie because the fishermen set out knowing that there was going to be these three storms. And they felt that they had the skills in order to navigate through it effectively and still accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. However, they found out that the storm was going to dictate to them more than they realized. We see a similar situation happening. We've got the holidays coming up. We know that they can be tumultuous. And there's a triangle relationship that we want to become aware of. The Family Solution Finder Learning Center provides education seminars on all these 33 issues. Actually, they provide 32 issues, but we're just going to use these three today. The enabling is one that has consequences. Boundaries are one that we set and then try and hold in place in order that this person can have a sustainable environment for successful recovery. And change, well, change is something that we all do, and we don't really understand that it happens in stages. Today we will. In enabling, there are 10 types. Did you know that? There are 10 types of enabling. The question is, which one? When I say to Jerry, Jerry, you need to stop enabling Alice, Jerry will say, sure, I'll do that. But he doesn't really know what to change. Now, if I said, okay, Jerry is using type number 3, problem awareness. Every time he says, if Jack would not hang out with those kids, he wouldn't have a drug problem. That is an enabling statement, and he needs to stop doing it because it takes the ownership off of Jack. Well, he's not aware of the fact that he's doing that. And if I go to him and say, hey, Jack, you need to stop with this problem awareness enabling that you're using, he's probably still not going to move off the coin on that. But what if a drug counselor or a family therapist or a professional who understands enabling were to have that conversation with them and then help them to understand, why are you enabling? Because that's the magic key. It's not so much that they are enabling or the type of the 10 that they're enabling with. It's the underlying factor. Because if you get Jerry to stop enabling on problem awareness, he might move to number 8, which is family reputation. And now he's using that because we never really helped him to solve why in the first place he was enabling. So when we look at enabling, we're looking at 10 types. Now, I don't expect that you're going to study this, but you can go to our website because it's there. And this presentation is there also. And so are other materials that we'll talk about before this presentation ends. But for right now, we're talking about the 10. Denial, meaning you don't even recognize that there is a problem. Jack does not have a problem. I would know it if you had a problem. Jack does not have a problem. That's denial, and it's enabling. Justification. You know, it seems reasonable that Jack would have a couple of drinks when he comes home. That's enabling. It's not reasonable. He shouldn't be. There's a problem there. You need to address it. It could be genetic, as Beth had pointed out for us. Allowing substance use. You know, I'd rather he drink here than at the bar where he might have to drive home and then get into an accident or arrested on a DUI. That's enabling. Suppressing your feelings. Boy, I wish I could tell him how this makes me feel and how it's impacting his brother and sister, but he's going to get mad and he may not ever talk to me again. He'll storm out the door or he might get violent. Well, that's enabling. You're suppressing your feelings. You're enabling him to continue. Avoiding the problem. Altogether, just saying, listen, this doesn't really affect me, so I'm not going to get involved. I'm his brother. Let Jack do what he's going to do. That's his problem. Okay, you're avoiding the problem. You're enabling him. Because as a brother, you could speak up and stop suppressing your feelings. You're allowing the substance use to care. You're using justification. You're probably in denial. It could be that you represent all 4. You know what? You're the one that needs the therapy also. And it's a good thing. Because when you find this out, you're going to find out exactly what you can do. And it's going to be more permanent. It's going to be a coping skill that you have going forward. So we shouldn't deflect away from asking others outside of our family, can you help me understand enabling, specifically avoiding the problem? Because I think that's what I'm doing. And they'd be glad to help you sort out and then create a plan of what you can do and how to approach it best. Protecting the family image and minimizing the situation are commonly used by family members. Playing the blame game. Well, you know, it's his mother's fault, or it's his teacher's fault, or it's the kids that he hangs out with fault. Everything other than him. Sometimes we blame him. And that's not such a good idea either, because blame doesn't solve anything. You need to find a better way to communicate this. We need for dignity to be a part of our correction and enabling. We need to understand we're doing this in order to create an environment of respect. Respect for them and respect, more importantly, for ourselves. And then assuming responsibility. The one that really rings true, and Dr. Delaney had pointed it out, was controlling behaviors. You cannot control, you may try, but you cannot control their behavior. You're going to go crazy if you try. So you need to, if this is your style, get together with a counselor and let them know, be open and use these counselors, like really work them for your sessions and find a solution for you to be able to come up with a style that's yours, that you'll do naturally in terms of controlling behaviors. So let's talk briefly about boundaries, because boundaries is an interesting thing because it kind of goes along with both enabling and it kind of goes along with the 5 stages of change. That's why this is a triangular relationship. And educating yourself on each one is very valuable. But when we look at boundaries, boundaries are not about set it and forget it. Okay, I already said this once. We agreed that this is a boundary. I can't believe you went ahead and did it anyhow. Well, I'm sorry. But the fact is, boundaries are challengeable, meaning often the person misusing substances will use the boundary as the starting point for negotiation. They're going to say to you, yes, I agree. I said back to you that I understand the consequences. And in the back of their mind, they'll say, we'll see if you really mean it later. And then they test it. So doesn't it make sense for you to create a script right now? This is not magical. You probably have an idea that they're going to do something about the boundaries. Why don't you have a script? Why don't you have a script where you're going to say something like, yes, I hear what you're saying about why it happened, but I still need you to agree to the boundaries. That's a sentence that you can actually write down. It's a script. It's okay to have a script. Matter of fact, your boundaries should be a written boundary. Use the worksheet in our seminars. Remember, we're here to educate you on these 3 issues. Matter of fact, in our learning system, you'll spend 6 hours on each of these topics. You're going to know these topics inside and out. More importantly, you're going to be able to share them with others, and that's what we want you to do. I noticed every time something like this happens, you always say sorry, but then you go on as if nothing had ever been agreed to. That's an important sentence for you to have, okay? It reestablishes the authority of the boundary. The boundary is what has authority. It takes you out of the equation. You say, no, no, no. Remember, we set up a boundary and we both agreed to it. Now, this is your responsibility. And if you didn't, and you're just showing me now that you did, guess what? You're going to be a broken record. Guess second, it's okay. It's good to be a broken record, okay? Because often they don't understand what it was that was said in the beginning, which is why writing it down. Another good reason why writing it down is you can get others involved in it, okay? They can understand clearly what it was that was the boundary. You don't have the telephone thing where one person said it, that changed it a little, and then another person told another person, and they changed it a little. And by the time they get around to the third person, the whole boundary's changed. But if it's written down, you can share it with more people. And also keep these boundaries in writing, even though they may get broken, in a binder or a book or a folder, because you can go back to them and see, was there something in the boundary that I kind of like left as kind of a get out clause by accident? Am I doing it consistently where I set boundaries, but unknowingly I actually create a limit that they can easily cross over? When we look at the worksheet, these are the things that you'll set up. And when you look at the input that you get from others in terms of successful boundaries, you're looking for them to help set up the environment. Once you set the boundary, you're an environmentalist of sort. I'm not going to go into the Green Deal. But what I am going to suggest is that you have a role to play in setting up a successful environment for this person. Once it's been broken, you absolutely, and they're expecting you to, and you're letting them down if you don't hold them accountable to the consequences of breaking the boundary. It is required that you write it down, because you will actually find you cannot, I don't want you to's, or don't do this isms. And you'll have a litany of them. And you'll find that one boundary can encompass a whole number of don't do this, a lot more clearly than itemizing, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. Well, wait a second. One boundary can wrap around all of that. And once you've written it out, you'll see that to be true. So we're going to now talk about the 5 stages of change. And Petraska di Clemente in the mid-90s, actually early 80s for Petraska, started to develop a theory, a transformational model that actually in psychology has been empirically proven. I just want to say something about empirically proven and the kind of best practices that both Greg and Dr. Delaney mentioned. These are critical standards, okay? You need to become a proponent of request. Anytime a treatment center says something to you, you should be saying back to them, what best practice are you using in order to be able to quantify and qualify why I should have an expectation that's a good idea to do it? Because everything that they should be doing should be based on best practices that they can show you the proof of that. Now, the question is, do they have fidelity to that? I mean, are they actually doing it? Well, that'll be proven out in your experience with them. But when we start to look at change and we start to look at Di Clemente's and Petraska's theory of change, we have pre-contemplation. And I'm going to go through each. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Okay, now, all the panelists, you're the only ones that I get to see. I don't get to see the other participants. Repeat after me. Let me see your lips move. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. Come on, there's only 5. But the fact of the matter is, you want this to roll off your tongue, because no matter where you are, you're constantly flicking on this light called, I'm gonna make a change. It's dark, I don't know what to do. You're at pre-contemplation. I'm not even aware that there is a problem. Then you're moving into contemplation. Okay, I think I don't wanna be that. From my assessment, I wanna be this. And in contemplation, you're starting to check from options in a menu where you're saying, that's what I want to be. I want to go to this detox center and this rehab program. This looks like I would be successful. Okay, now it's preparation. You've selected one of the options. You've moved out of contemplation and into preparation. And now you're actually saying, I'm going to pack my bag. I'm going to book a ticket, wherever this is. I'm going to get there. This is what I'm going to do to prepare in order to take this change. And then you move into action. Look at me doing this. This is great. This is working out. And then the 5th one is, now that I've learned all these skills during my IOP, I am going to go out back into my life and I'm going to use them. How am I doing? Well, you know what? You did the same thing for buying tires. You did the same thing when you started to look for peanut butter, okay? The change is change. It doesn't change. It's always change. It's always the theories of change. The beauty of this is, with Miller and Rolnick's motivational interviewing theories, which once again are empirically proven, we've integrated this into your education, not by accident, but because of what I just told you. At pre-contemplation, you don't realize that there's a problem, okay? You don't understand the problem. At contemplation, you need to find the next step. Leave brochures around your house for treatment centers. Leave things that they can make a selection from readily available. Because when it happens, you want to be Johnny on the spot with that choice. You don't want to sit there and say, well, in a couple of days, I'll get you the brochure. Lost opportunity. The change was in pre-contemplation right now. Could take him 6 months to move from contemplation to preparation. Finally, he decided, yes, this is what I want to do from the options in contemplation that I was reviewing. And now he's actually booked a ticket and he's leaving for the treatment center, okay? So this is kind of how this works. Now, in order to help you understand this level of enabling, boundaries, and the 5 stages of change, we're in the process of putting in a learning center in each county across Ohio. This is the book that introduces that to you. Get in touch with us and then we'll send it to you. This is the instructor's guide to set up a center in your community, okay? Then these are the families learning series. There are 32 issues that the family is going to go through. We're talking about the different roles families play, childhood trauma. We're talking about getting an assessment, selecting what to do when you're at the ER. There's lots of things you should be doing at the ER. Did you know what to do when the police show up? Do you know how to navigate the legal court system in a drug specialty court? You'll learn it here, okay? Matter of fact, you'll spend a month on it. And I'm telling you, when you get done with this family learning series, you're going to be so knowledgeable, you're going to be able to share it with others. which is exactly what we want. We want to hug you, okay? And that's what this material does. We want to give you hope, and that's what the learning series does. We want to share in your family love because we're inviting the community to come in. Because as part of a learning center, you get to go out and give them these books. The 13 stakeholders in every county will have their own book. This one is for the courts, okay? And I don't know that you can read it. From the legal court system to the family table. We want to show up at the family table. It's the most difficult place to be, but it's the most meaningful place and dialogue to be involved in. And if we're responsible, and we do it correctly, we will really be in front of this curve. Families do not have to live their lives anymore in a response to being a victim to the drug epidemic. We can teach them what they need to know and give them the coping skills to do it. I want to thank you all very much for your time. Please feel free to contact me. You do not have to go through this alone.
Wow, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate this, but gosh, all three of you, it was just wonderful. If anyone has any questions, please enter them into the Q&A or the chat section, because you've got this great panelists in front of you that will be happy to answer it, and we can certainly follow up afterward. As I mentioned, we will share the slides. I do want to open it up. Everyone can turn off their mics for questions. I want to go back to Greg after the beginning, since you got to speak first, and give you another chance for speaking, both Greg and Beth. What would you give, what piece of advice would you, after hearing all this, which was wonderful advice, to sum up for families going into the holidays and beyond?
Go ahead, Beth.
I think it's simple to talk about education again. And we've gone through, Roy's provided some tools, but I'll also say, if you go right now to the Ohio Department of Health website, to SAMHSA, the Ohio Mental Health, there are some things that are talking about COVID-19, how to cope. But oh my gosh, this is so funny, isn't it? I'm going to keep on. And being prepared. As Roy said, the biggest thing, and as Greg said, you've got to be ready. And I don't think people don't know what they don't know. So if they have someone in their life that has mental health disorders, if they have substance use disorders, get ready ahead of time and make sure that you understand that you probably have stuff your own self that you have to figure out. So with the help of tools and being ready for when those critical moments occur, then that will be, I think, especially important. And taking some time. Right now in the information age, you can get credible, and that's what I would say, get credible information. As an oncology nurse practitioner, I have to often help people weed through what is good information and what is not good information. So even if you have time, just take time to figure out what is credible evidence, what are credible websites like Relink. That would be really useful. So when that time comes and when those questions are asked, you're ready with information. Greg, do you have anything to add as I turn the light back on in the office? And as Roy said, we can brighten the light. I thought that was so funny, especially since this darkness has happened behind me.
It's like you're camping, Beth.
I know, right?
I think the only thing that I would add to that is, well, a couple things actually. One is, I've talked to, probably thousands of family members over the course of the 13 years I've been doing this. And there's this often helpless feeling that I have no idea what to do. And I think hopefully what you've seen today is that at a minimum, you have this amazing tool from Relink that at least gives you a place to go to say, okay, it can answer a couple very simple questions for you if you're looking to help your family member find that first step of treatment. So if you're into that place where you're moving from contemplation, into that next step, realize that we don't have a capacity problem in the state of Ohio when it comes to resource for people who are seeking help. We have an information challenge. And one of the things that Relink has done is they've filled that gap of being able to at least know how to shrink down my search to try to help my loved one get some help. The other thing I would say too is that at a local level, the way that Ohio is structured to provide help is pretty wise in that it's decentralized and it is local. And so one quick place you can always go is to your local board. And what that means is if you Google your mental health and recovery board of the county that you're in, you will find the resources that have been set aside by Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services to give you a first step of help. So sometimes I know that it can get very overwhelming, and we go out to Google and suddenly we have 14 ads and I don't know which one it is. And do I need to send my family member to, Tucson, Arizona? No, the help is here and it is available. And so I want to encourage you with that. The other thing I would say is that if you're fortunate, I think I saw a note from one of the task force in Medina County, and that's a great example. You actually have recovery community organizations that are sprinkled throughout the state of Ohio that have amazing peers and other people that understand how to navigate some of this for someone. And so, that's another thing to go out and look up, and that can be found. And we'll send that link out when we send the deck out to all of you who participated. So there's some good things to just say. Don't get overwhelmed. Take a breath. Some of the things that Roy shared were super important in that if they're in active addiction, the last thing I'd say, if someone is actively using, your ability to have a cognitive conversation with them about what the next step is unlikely. So you're looking for the moment when they're approaching you and they're at that place, and then you're ready for that question and then ready for that next action.
And Greg, can you say just a moment very quickly about, as a family member with relapse, and how we historically have looked at that and how maybe we can look at that really just super quick?
Yeah, there was a great question that came over about that, of what you find the most helpful when working with someone that was doing great, but then they've relapsed.
Well, I think the first piece of it is to recognize that even if you've had a length of time of sobriety or clean time, and we don't like to use those words, if I'm in recovery and I have a blip or I have a bobble, it doesn't mean that that person's starting from scratch. It's a moment in time. It was a decision that was made. Sometimes it can be triggered by a smell. It can be triggered by stress. There's all kinds of things that can push a person to relapse. What I like to do is move that word relapse into the word I've come out of remission, or I've had a reoccurrence of my issue, because that it's not to soften it, but it's to put it into the proper context. If I have a chronic relapsing issue and I have a moment where I bobble and fall back into it, I want to have an honest conversation. I want to be able to not shame the individual right off the jump, but to say, okay, that's it. That's a moment in time. Let's freeze that moment in time and let's get back to what we already have learned and know. How can I support you in re-engaging your recovery community? How can I support you in re-engaging a meeting if you need to? Do we need to go back and do some reinforcement of treatment? One of the tough parts that happens to folks when they do relapse is the incredible shame that comes with that. And what we don't want to do is throw gasoline on that. So come to it empathetically to say, we wouldn't, for example, one of the things we use all the time, we wouldn't have our friend who is dealing with diabetes, and here it is Christmas time, and they slam 5 Buckeyes, while they're sitting around the candy table. We wouldn't immediately go about shaming them for falling out of their managed sugar routine, right? Same thing here. Now we know it's more serious with this here, perhaps not, but that would be my approach there. Beth, is that good enough, or do you have something else to add there?
No, Barbara, go girl.
I think Roy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, if I could, on seminar number 18 on our website, we've got a complete seminar on that topic. And in that, we discussed the 3 stages of relapse. There's actually 3 stages. They actually set off flags that they're on their way. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it happens so fast. But often we'll see it. It's self-care, and then it's kind of a mental preparation where they start talking about the glory of doing drugs, and then the physical where they're starting to hunt out where they might be able to find it. So in the self-care, we see it in nutrition, not going to work, not attending their 12-step program. They're setting off flags. If you walk into their living room and there's White Castle hamburgers all over the floor, you pretty much know that they're not taking good care of themselves. that's a flag. They're on their way to a relapse. And an intervention would be get them reassociated back with self-care and nutrition. It may be that the doctor should order a nutritionist to come to the home and sit down and talk about the value of nutrition. There's lots of interventions. Like Greg said, a very well-made point. Everything you need is out there. The main challenge that we have is you as family members don't fully understand what's available. They'll tell you how to use it once you get there. But you have to get out there and say, this is what I think is the issue. Where should I go? And Relink will help you to do that.
All right, guys, we just hit 11 o'clock. I do want to grab a couple of questions real quick. If y'all have a few more minutes, we understand if some people have to go. We thank everyone so much for joining us today. It's definitely our hope and prayer that this was really practical and valuable for you. I know from my perspective, man, I think it definitely was, and I can't thank you guys enough. We are going to have 2 more webinars in this series, so please stay tuned for more announcements on those coming up in January and February. And as both Roy and Greg and Beth all have resources that they can share with you, I think this overall message that we definitely want to convey is do not be alone. Help is out there. It's not always easy. It's not going to be a magic wand, but it is there. And just please be knowing of the resources and the tools, whether it's relink.org or Greg or Beth or Roy's resources, they are available. One last question that came in, and this is directed for you, Roy. What is your strategy or plan for implementing your family program in every county in Ohio?
What I'm doing is I'm selecting the 13 key stakeholders and I'm meeting with them. If you're one of those, go ahead and get in touch with me. I've divided the state up into 4 quadrants. There's 88 counties. So then what I'll be doing is actually giving to them all the materials that they need in order to run a learning center. There are 4 levels of learning center. The first is you just hand out the book. The second is that you put on a presentation, one of the 32 learning series that we have. And every part of that material, the PowerPoint with voiceover, the handouts, the clinical papers are provided to you free. There are no obstacles to doing this. I don't want anything to get in the way of helping. The goal is to impact the souls of our family and to be able to be there for them with a wealth of knowledge that's digestible. And we're going to show them exactly how to do that in every county. I hope that answers your question. If not, please give me a call.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just so appreciate your everyone's heart for the family. I mean, I know in my faith that's so important. The family is a foundation for everyone to grow and develop and to be all that God created us to be. And it is just absolutely heartbreaking when families are struggling, whether it's with addiction or any other issue that plagues us as we're going through this world. I think, as Beth said, we're all going through this world dealing with our junk and our stuff as best we can. And just this message today of hope. I thank you guys so much for sharing the hope and just the message of the grace and mercy that we constantly have to display both to ourselves and to others. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Please stay tuned for the next 2 webinars in this series, as it is definitely our heart to keep everyone educated and connected. Thank you all. Have a very Merry Christmas, everyone, and Happy New Year. Thank you all.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Barbara. See you.
Bye.
Bye. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes.